Thank you. It's like
Ian, what is this projecting off of? There's no. Oh, sorry.
Are you guys ready? Okay. There's no plan B. A compare and contrast of the Chesapeake Bay and Tybee Island by
me, Stella,
and me, Ian Jablonski. Tybee Island is a barrier island of Georgia. This island is located along the eastern coast. Tybee Island forms a part of the Savannah's metropolitan area and was once called Savannah's Beach. Tybee is home to countless different species, including fishes, birds, and marine mammals. Some of the more common animals you find at Tybee are sea turtles, crabs, sharks, jellyfish, and dolphins. Another interesting fact is that Tybee kind of shares a name with an island above it named Little Tybee Island. This island is surprisingly larger than Tybee Island. It is approximately 6,180 acres larger than Tybee.
Okay, so the Chesapeake Bay is approximately 200 miles long, and it starts up in Maryland until it all empties out into the Atlantic Ocean. But the Chesapeake Bay watershed starts up in Cooperstown, New York, and ends up back into the Atlantic Ocean. This bay is home to over 3,600 plant and animal species. It holds up to 18 trillion gallons of water. Over 150 rivers end up into this bay in solely Virginia. The four main being the Potomac, the Rappahannock, the York, and the James, and that being from north to south order. And some of the most well-known species are the blue crabs, the oysters, and the ospreys. So here, up until about here, that is Virginia, all the way up until like here. And then this little sliver, and this kind of looks like an island, or it's a peninsula, that is Maryland. Here you have Delaware, and then all the way here down, that is North Carolina, and this is the Outer Banks.
Most toxic pollution in Tybee Island is from acid rainfall. In 2004, Tybee Island ensured an oil spill off the coast of the island. The ship tank held 37,000 gallons of oil, but it was unsure how much was released and why. Although it made its way up to North Beach, gladly the effects were minimal. Georgia's beaches have started to have a big problem with pollution, but Tybee Island is still one of the cleanest bays on the eastern shore.
84% of the Chesapeake Bay is partially or fully impaired by toxic water pollution. On average, 157,000 barrels get dumped into the Chesapeake Bay every year. This bay contains a bacteria called Vibrio, which is a threatening skin and blood infections. And when you have this, it can kind of cause your skin to quite literally melt. And in the 1870s, it took 3 days for the oysters to completely filter the Chesapeake Bay. Now it takes over a week for just hardly 1% to get filtered out. And the distance between Tybee Bay and the Chesapeake Bay is roughly 420 miles.
Okay, toxic water pollution is caused by pesticides, fertilizers, chemicals that have been sprayed or leaked near the water in concentrated feeding operations such as industrial farming, radioactive waste, or oil leaks and oil spills, and mostly of global warming. The first ever spill was estimated to be in 1889 or 1890. It extended from LA south to northern San Diego, and the source of the spill is unknown. Another example of an area that had toxic water pollution is in East Palestine, Ohio. When the train fell off the track, it leaked lots of toxic gases and oil leaks. These gases and oil leaks soaked into the ground and into the house drinkable waters and into the atmosphere.
And the biggest oil spill in the Chesapeake Bay was around 1976, when 250,000 barrels of oil were leaked into the Potomac River and venturing out into the Chesapeake Bay. And this killed roughly 25,000 to 50,000 birds and sea creatures. Yeah. So, effects toxic water pollution has on people is cholera. This disease is caused in your intestinal tract, and it is called Vibrio cholerae, sort of like Vibrio, like we have in our Chesapeake Bay. And this causes extreme dehydration and even death. An estimated 1.4 to 4 million people are affected by this disease each year, and 21,000 to 143,000 people are killed by this disease. And these are hundreds of Vibrio cholerae microbes. And a chemical that affects people is arsenic. And being exposed to this chemical can cause cancers such as skin, lung, bladder, and kidney. And this affects 140 million people. And this is caused when unfiltered water gets leaked into people's drinking water. And this is caused when people have high toxic pollution levels, like in India, in Zimbabwe, and sometimes even parts of our country.
And also this is the type of skin cancer that you get from the arsenic if you get exposed to it.
And that is the chemical in the top right. So animals are affected are bald eagles, and in the 1970s there was a pesticide called DDT that is now banned in the US, but it would cause a calcium defect in bald eagles' reproductive organs, and when this would happen, they wouldn't be able to lay their eggs properly, where they would crack open too early and they wouldn't be able to live, and the baby bald eagles wouldn't be able to live stably, and this caused a massive decrease in their bald eagles population, but they are now back onto the stable list.
Another animal that is affected by toxic pollution are sea turtles. So sea turtles, Kemp's ridley, olive ridley, and flatbacks to be specific, are affected by oil spills. The turtles are thrown off by these plumes of water and having to swim around them, causing them to be exhausted, exposing them to harsh temperatures because of changing migratory patterns, and as well being vulnerable to predators. This causes these turtles to not be able to lay their eggs, and this causes a tremendous decrease in their population.
How this affects manatees is manatees live in pretty shallow environments, and when sewage manure and fertilizer manure gets released into their environment and habitat, this causes algal plumes to sort of surface on the water, and one of two things will happen. If they eat this, they will die because of the high toxicity levels that it has to them solely, and it'll cause sunlight and vitamin D not being able to get down to the seagrass that is their main source of diet, and this will cause them to die due to a lack of nutrients or die off of starvation. So what will happen in the future for the Chesapeake Bay is if some species sort of leave or die in this bay, it will cause a chain reaction in their food chain, and this will cause their predator to have to start feeding off of other animals, and their prey to sort of skyrocket in population. So for example, with large fish, the bald eagle will have to start feeding off of more sea ducks, and the clam and mussels will start to escalate in population because there's not as many sea ducks now to keep the population down. And with ospreys, they will no longer have a source of food and vitamins and nutrients, so they will have to start either feeding off of more small fish, which is working for less amounts of food, or they will leave completely out of this area and we will no longer have any more ospreys in our bay.
Okay, so in this island, the industrial population acidity levels are tremendously high, raising the waters in the bay to toxic levels in some parts of the island. These pollutants are released daily into the aquatic ecosystem, and this has become a serious threat to these ecosystems. If this continues, the pH level can be extremely low, and this can cause the animals to leave or die, as well as the plants not being able to survive, and then this can become a dead zone too, all because of the pH level.
And a dead zone is a habitat or body of water that is completely uninhabitable by any organisms at all. So how dead zones form is heat starts to come down and fresh river water is slowly entering the bay, which is stable because their oxygen levels are neutral, so even, and there's enough salt in the water, and living organisms are thriving. Then we get where there's algal blooms and dead algae coming down into the water, and there's fresh water taking over the complete surface of the salt water, and there's not as many organisms now. And then we get to complete dead zone, where there's dead fish causing CO2 levels to rise, and fresh water is still completely taking over the surface of the salt water, and the algal bloom is almost completely taking over the surface of the salt water as well. And you have oxygen deprived salt water, and nothing is living below in the salt water.
How we can help is by minimizing the uses of fertilizer and pesticides, or just not supporting the companies at all, and because of the runoff, it all ends up in a body of water. Another way we can help is when going to dispose of chemicals or motor fluids is disposing it properly. This means to not dumping them down drains, toilets, sewage drains, and storm drains. You should not allow them to soak in your yard or property.
If you live in a community that is around a body of water, like Lancaster County, you can always go out and volunteer to help pick up stuff or trash and rubbish that is along the side of the road, on the sidewalk, so you don't get hit by a car, because then you can't help. But when this happens, you are helping tremendously by not letting any of this garbage end up into the creek, which can end up into a river, which can end up into the bay. And there are many organizations that people have founded to clean up catastrophic disasters of oil spills, such as the Garrison Resolution Group, the National Institute of Environmental Sciences, and the Downs Law Group. Now, with these examples and ways to help, we can all be a effect that gets put forth to a better future in the world. Thank you.
Good job.
Do you have any questions before we have to leave?
I'm sorry you guys didn't get to be able to play the Jeopardy.
Okay.
All right. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. Well done.